previewing Troy and the Cajuns with the voice of the Trojans. He is Barry McKnight on Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, huge matchup this weekend. The first place Louisiana Raging Cajuns taking on the second place Troy Trojans in Troy. Let's bring on the voice of the Trojans, Barry McKnight. We talk about, he recaps the Troy season, what turned it around, and insertion into the lineup. Their pitching is getting healthy. Of course, we talk about the sweep against Coastal. Trojans have a heavy left-handed hitting lineup, which is no surprise due to their park. And we break down the pitching matchups between the Cajuns and the Trojans with the voice of the Troy Trojans, Barry McKnight, on Locked On Sunbelt. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Huge series this weekend in the Sunbelt. The Louisiana Raging Cajuns, first place, going up to Troy, Alabama, to take on the Trojans, currently in second place, 3 games behind the Cajuns. We bring in the voice. Probably should be, it shouldn't be at Barry McKnight. It should be voice of the Sunbelt. But he is the lucid tones of Barry McKnight joins us. Barry, thanks for hopping on. Why don't you go ahead and just give everybody a recap of the Troy Trojans season up until this point?
Well, it was, if you had told me, Dave, that at the beginning of the year that the reigning Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year would not even, be in the lineup down the stretch, and that the preseason Sun Belt Conference Pitcher of the Year would only just now actually be in the conference rotation. We're talking about Shane Lewis and Grayson Stewart, and Grayson has made a good contribution lately, but Shane has just been, it's been difficult for him this year. That Troy at that point, with those parameters being explained, would be 2 games up on the field in second place, 3 games behind Louisiana in first. I would have been shocked, but that's exactly what has happened so far. Really, I think small things have led to, number one, this current 6-game winning streak, and number 2, moving up in the standings and moving up like a shot in the RPI.
Yeah.
It was 2.5 weeks ago that Troy played at Appalachian State and inserted a guy named Ben Arnett into the lineup. Now, he played last year but got hurt in the pre-conference. He came in as a third baseman, and then he got healthy during the offseason, and in the final preseason scrimmage he got hurt, an entirely another injury. So I knew him. I hadn't seen much of him. Well, finally they put him in the starting lineup, which was a surprise. I wasn't even sure that he was available against Appalachian State, but they put him in left field. And they moved the left fielder, Brooks Bryan, back to catcher, which is normally where he is. And boy, that really kind of lit the candle. I think the last I checked that Arnett's hitting over 460 right now, and he's homered 3 times in about 9 games. And it really has solidified the lineup and really provided a right-handed bat in a predominantly left-handed order. And on the pitching side, people just got healthy. Garrett Gaines looks like the old Garrett Gaines. Luke Lyon has been really good. Grayson Stewart, he had a really strong outing last time against Coastal Carolina, and he'd been struggling all year. So a lot of the problems that surface in the course of any baseball season, a lot of those have really kind of at least started to work themselves out for Troy.
That's like a little league move, moving the left fielder to catcher. You don't see that.
Yeah. Well, for Brooks, you had to have him in the lineup. He was a terrific high school catcher, but Dave, last year, his freshman year, he wasn't going to play over Clay Stearns. He wasn't going to play over Caleb Bartolero. But what he did was he got his feet wet, and he learned a lot from those guys. He's a natural catcher, and you wanted to have him in the lineup somewhere this year, and they had a really good grad transfer catcher named Blake Sutton, who was a left-handed bat. Well, now over the last 5 games, I think Brooks has started all 5 behind the plate with Arnett in left field. And that has been really kind of even the lineup out. It's a left-handed heavy lineup. Having Arnett at the bottom of the order, right behind Aiden Gilroy, has really kind of evened things out a little bit because Troy had been susceptible to left-handed pitching up until that point. But who knows what happens, down the stretch. But at this point right now, I think that's really the thing that kind of lit the whole candle for Troy.
Yeah, we're talking with Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans. Usually the catcher's backup position would be like third or first. Usually the catcher is not playing the outfield. That tells you what kind of athlete he is.
He is an athlete, and he leads the nation in RBIs. He leads the Sun Belt in RBIs, second in the league in home runs. He's got crazy power, Brooks Bryan does, and he's just a sophomore. But it's his level of compete that's really something. You have some guys that are just winners, and Brooks is that guy. He's, when the game is on the line, and you can go up and down the roster and find guys like this on the Troy team, there's just that little added extra gear that he gets into in terms of competitiveness and concentration. So, he has been really, I'm not going to say a surprise because the potential's already been there, but goodness knows he has been with a team that has Cole Myers and Ethan Cavanaugh and Will Butcher and those. He's been Troy's best player, certainly the most productive power guy in the lineup.
Talking to Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so you said a heavy left-handed lineup. I don't think that would surprise anybody in the Sunbelt. Was that intentional? Is that intentional with the ballpark? And explain to people who may not be all that familiar with the ballpark why that may be the case.
Yeah, it is the case, and I think everybody would agree with that. If you've never been to Riddle Pace Field, the right field wall is very adjacent. I mean, it's right there. It's 27 feet high. We call it the Trojan Wall. It's 27 feet high, so you got to get a little lift to get it out, but it's 310 feet, and it definitely plays well to left-handed hitters. Shane Lewis had 27 homers last year. He was a switch hitter, and he had a lot of them over the wall in right. Same thing with Brooks and with Cole Myers and Aiden Gilroy, Peyton Watts, the freshman second baseman. That's just you hit it with the right angle, with the right launch angle, and you don't have it. It's one of those parks where in right you don't have to hit it squarely to get it out. And if you got a strong enough guy, you don't even have to hit it all that well to get it out over in right field. So yeah, it plays that way, and you certainly recruit that way. But again, you've got to have some balance in the lineup as well, because you play, a lot of games on the road, and there's a good bit of wind out to left field most days as well, right into Doubles Alley. So you got to have that as well. But yeah, it's left-handed for a reason, and the reason is Riddle Pace Field.
To remind Cajuns fans, one Steven Trosclair hit a pop fly to right field that ended up being a grand slam to actually win the Sun Belt Championship. What was that, 2015?
Yes, that's right. Good memory on that one. I remember that one because, I was watching it and I gave up on it, and all of a sudden, there it goes. That happens a lot at Riddle Pace.
So how does that affect, and we'll get to the last series on the road. So how does that, is there a big split with the way the Trojans hit on the road versus at home?
Really not. There is, there's other parks that are hitter friendly to the left-handed side. It's just more pronounced at Riddle Pace Field. And we were kidding around about this, about Doubles Alley, which is out in left field. That has always kind of been the approach. If you hit one out, that's fine. But, if you get under it just a little bit, then it's a fly ball. What you want to be able to do is hit it in the alley with some authority. And that's why, the doubles approach really kind of serves this team well, certainly at home, but absolutely on the road. Troy has hit well on the road quite a bit. The Appalachian State series, the series against ULM at the very beginning. Of course, last weekend against Coastal Carolina, there were 8 home runs hit, and Troy hit all 8. And I think 4 of them were hit to left field. So, it's an approach. Certainly you recruit towards that at home, but the idea is to get, well-rounded all-around hitters. And Troy certainly, especially lately, has had a lot of those.
Let's take a timeout. We'll continue our conversation with the voice of the Troy Trojans, Barry McKnight. We talk about that huge sweep against Coastal Carolina, their rocket rise in the RPI, and how big this series is for the Trojans to get that at-large berth. Let me first tell you about Monopoly Go and then Lafayette Travel. All right, game off. Let's take a timeout. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. Already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome the prizes you unlock. And there's so much more to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games, the digging for treasure, and a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that can help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on, and Lafayette Travel. Escape to Lafayette, Louisiana, the happiest city in America, where every visit is uniquely seasoned with unforgettable experiences. Savor world-class cuisine, including mouth-watering boudin, savory gumbo, and piping hot crawfish, seasoned to perfection. Experience lively festivals that celebrate Lafayette's one-of-a-kind heritage. Explore magnificent trails that lead you through a rich cultural history and breathtaking natural beauty. Discover the untouched purity of our cypress and tupelo swamps, where you can paddle past nesting birds and sunbathing alligators. Immerse yourself in the vibrant rhythms of Cajun and Zydeco music that can be heard any night of the week. Whether your passion is for our rich cultural history, the bustling culinary scene, or the distinctive blend of Cajun and Zydeco music, the happiest city in America has something for everyone. Start planning your adventure at LafayetteTravel.com/season. All right, Dave Schultz, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's continue our conversation with Barry McKnight, the voice of the Trojans. We go back and look at that series sweep of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, their rocket rise in the RPI, and how important this series is for the Trojans and a potential at-large berth in the NCAA tournament. Talking to Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans, going to preview this Cajuns-Trojans series. Okay, so let's talk about last week. A huge weekend for Troy. And by the way, all of a sudden, Coastal Carolina's lost like 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And, they go back and, they weren't that far away from losing 2 out of 3 to the Cajuns. However, where this is about Troy, they take all 3. I mean, what was the mindset going in there? Because you guys are coming off, going in there, coming on the heels of the Cajuns losing 2 out of 3. And they were as hot as anybody in the entire nation. And Coastal cooled them off with their hot bats against the good Cajuns pitching. What was the mindset of Troy going into that series after watching the Chanticleers take 2 out of 3 from the Cajuns?
Yeah, you're looking at that series, and it's quite frankly, Dave, it's a lot like the mindset heading into this series. At that point, this time last week, Troy and Coastal were tied in second place, and okay, this is where we're going to figure out whether Troy is a contender or a pretender, whether we deserve to be there or not. So the mindset there was, still opportunity to prove yourself. In the first game of the series, and it was 4-4, Troy had been down 4-2. They tied it up 4-4 and by the time they got to the 7th inning, I mean, that game, and game 1 is always a game that, the series can tip upon. And Troy had runners at second and third, and they intentionally walked Brooks Bryan, which was a smart move, to pitch to Trey Cobb. And Cobb is a senior. There's a lot of seniors on this team. Cobb's a senior, and he told me after the game he kind of took that as a personal challenge. You walk in Bryan to get to him, and he hit it out. He hit a grand slam. All of a sudden, a 4-4 game is an 8-4 game. And I'm not posturing like that broke Coastal Carolina's backs. But after that point, it was all Troy. The next day, Troy wins by 7. And, of course, they run-rolled Coastal Carolina on Sunday. That was really the point at which Troy certainly started believing in themselves a little bit more in the context of the series. And I think Coastal Carolina really started accentuating the doubt that they had. They had the midweek losses at Creighton, which, was a long trip. And then they come back and they're thinking, man, Troy has won this first game, and they did it with the long ball. Troy hit 8 home runs in that series. Coastal didn't have any. So it was a game in which the pitchers really threw well. Garrett Gaines threw well, Luke Lyon in game 2, and then Grayson Stewart really showed that, he is back pitching really, really strong in game 3. But I think it was at one point, that grand slam in the 7th inning of game 1 by Tremaine Cobb that really dictated the remainder of that series.
It feels like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that what the Cajuns couldn't do was take advantage of Coastal's bullpen, because the starters have some good stuff, but their bullpen, I mean, some guys have a tough time breaking a pane of glass, but they were effective against the Cajuns, especially in that Sunday ball game when it appeared that the Cajuns had the advantage. They did not seem to have that issue with Troy. Troy took way advantage of the Coastal Carolina bullpen.
What I thought was interesting, and I'm not second guessing anybody, but I think in the first game, the 8-6 Troy win, Coastal used, I want to say 6 pitchers in the first game. And, some of them were situational. They just ran through a lot. And by the time Sunday came around, they had to recycle some of those guys, and they weren't as fresh as they needed to be. And some of those guys weren't high velo guys anyway. You give them an inning or 2 on Friday and you expect them to come back on Sunday, and they lost even that much more off of their stuff. So the fact that they had to recycle a couple of those guys just to get guys in the game, I think they had 3 pitchers, 3 relievers who had to pitch on Sunday, and they weren't nearly as sharp as they looked on Friday. And I think that's one of the other factors of it, as well as Troy's pitching depth, the depth on their staff, I thought was a real positive, critical factor in the contest as well. Coastal just didn't have enough depth all up and down their staff.
Talking to Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so the benefit of beating Coastal Carolina in Conway, South Carolina, is to, big uptick in RPI. I think I saw it at one point in time up 25 from 71 to 46, so a top 50 team. So I'm going to ask you, because the issue with the Cajuns, and I've said this from the get-go, is that their schedule their out-of-conference schedule was not very good. They had one big weekend with Vandy, LSU, and Houston, but other than that, unfortunately, they lost a midweek game to Houston Christian, and it is killing them right now, or else they'd be like certainly top 40, if not top 30 team. How is Troy's out-of-conference schedule? And, how much do they – because basically this is what I'm looking at, Barry. I don't want the baseball Sunbelt Conference tournament, if I'm the Cajuns or anybody else for that fact of the matter, relying like the basketball tournament. Like, you got to win basketball to get in. Right. Baseball should not be that way. I don't care if we're moving up seeds, but it feels like if you're a Sunbelt team, you have to be mid-30s, and then you're kind of in, especially if you're the conference champion regular season. But if I'm sitting at 45 or 50, then I gotta make waves in the Sunbelt Conference tournament. Where do you think Troy is as what do we got? 3 weekends left in the regular season.
If I'm sitting at 45 or 50, I'm not sitting comfortably. That's for sure. And the opportunity is there. The non-conference schedule for Troy, they swept Harvard in Troy. Harvard hasn't been very good. Lost a series at Northwestern State early, and they have struggled this year. That has been critical. A series win 3 out of 4 to open the year against Southern Illinois Edwardsville, and that hasn't helped very much as well. So and winning a series at Indiana was probably the best non-conference deal, but Indiana hasn't been as good as they have been in the last couple of years. So this is necessary. I mean, this weekend is necessary for Troy. Remember last year, Troy won 40 games and was one of the last ones in the NCAA tournament in that Tuscaloosa regional. So, you're never comfortable. But if you look at the remainder of Troy's schedule, Louisiana here in Troy, then next week at Texas State, and then James Madison in Troy in the final week of the regular year. This is, in terms of RPI, Dave, this is it. This is the one that can really make you sit a little bit easier. The factors involved are that it is at home, and that is a huge deal for Troy here. It is against a Louisiana team that I think Troy matches up well. The pitching staff with that lineup, and goodness knows they've got some really good guys in the lineup. But, the big question mark I've got, Troy offensively has been really good this year, even without contributions from Lewis and some of the others. how they match up with that Cajun weekend rotation is a huge question mark. I mean, everybody, I don't know who all has told you about this or how much you have deduced this on its own, but nobody relishes taking on Louisiana on the weekend. They're their weekend starters.
Okay, one last time out before we conclude our conversation with Barry McKnight. We talk about the pitching, and there's a couple of guys that the Cajuns have to watch out for at the top of the Troy lineup, a lot like Sam Antonacci and Blake Berthal. Uh-oh. Let me first tell you about Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Remember, you get those last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And you get that all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout and the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's wrap up the conversation with the voice of the Troy Trojans, Barry McKnight. We talk about the pitching in this series between the Cajuns and Troy, and a couple of guys the Cajuns are going to have to deal with at the top of the Troy lineup. It should be an amazing series. Really appreciate Barry for hopping on. Let's get back to it. He's Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans on Locked On Sunbelt. So, yeah, we'll talk about the matchups here momentarily, but it feels like Troy is in the same spot as the Cajuns. If the Cajuns just take one against Troy and win 2 out of 3 against Georgia Southern and take 2 out of 3 from South Alabama, they'll be okay. For whatever reason, James Madison has a really good RPI, and it feels like if Troy takes 2 out of 3 the rest of the way, they're going to be sitting mid-30s heading into that Sun Belt Conference tournament and should be okay.
Yeah, and that's, you want to win the series, and Troy has done a good job of that lately. Troy's won 4 straight series. You want to be able to earn your way in without having to scoreboard watch and hope, some of the teams that you've beaten earlier have good finishes just to help strengthen your RPI. You can't look at it that way. You've got to control what you can control, and that's beating the teams in front of you, particularly at home. So, yeah, it's the Coastal Carolina series was one of the all-time, great road accomplishments for this team. But what you don't want is to pat yourself on the back too much. I mean, it was memorable and all that kind of stuff, but all the momentum that Troy gained from the last couple of weeks can be given away this Friday and Saturday and Sunday, with if they come in sleepwalking against the Cajuns. So in terms of RPI, the best shot Troy has to give themselves some comfort heading into a potential NCAA tournament is this weekend. I mean, I can think of all these different levels, Dave, that I can use to present how this weekend is so incredibly critical. But even then, I probably would understate just how important it actually all is.
Yeah, I know they just came off a sweep. Tough to ask for a sweep, regardless of who you're playing. Baseball's not that way. So 2 out of 3 would go a long way for either team, to be honest with you. All right, let's wrap things up with Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans. Let's get to the Trojans versus the Cajuns. So the Cajuns have a couple of lefties to begin with. Neither one pitched particularly well against Coastal Carolina, and so now they came back to the TIG and pitched very well. On this past weekend against Southern Miss. Andrew Herman did not actually, he did figure in the decision because the Cajuns took the lead in the bottom half of the 8th, ended DeBar's 3-run home run. He only gave up 2 runs in 8 innings. Chase Morgan gave up, I think, 2 runs in 6 innings. They ended up coming back in that one, but lost it. So you have a couple of guys that, don't throw hard, but breaking ball changeup. Morgan may get it in the 90s, but really the off-speed pitches are those guys' bread and butter. How does Troy match up with guys that don't, pitch it as hard as, say, an LP Langevin, who is, here's the fastball, guys, see if you can hit it.
Right. Yeah. I think the key offensively for Troy, and we've already talked about, Brooks Bryan and Tremaine Cobb and Ben Arnett and Aiden Gilroy down at the bottom of the order. But it's the first two guys. Cole Myers has been terrific. To me, he's been the best center fielder in the league, one of the best center fielders in the country. And he's the leadoff hitter as well. Leads the league in steals, leads the country in walks. He's on base all the time. He is a grinder. He's really talented, physically talented, really good player, but at the plate, he'll grind against you. Number 2 hitter is a right-hander, another senior like Cole. It's Ethan Cavanaugh. I think he enters the week. He is 4th in the league in hitting. Only has 2 homers, but like 43 RBIs. Another grinder. What those guys are good matchups against the people you're talking about, because they'll foul off pitches over and over again. They won't swing at anything that's not a strike. And they have both been phenomenal this year at getting on base and scoring runs. I don't know that I can remember at Troy a pair of 1-2 hitters in the order who have been uniquely suited to each other better than Myers and Cavanaugh. Those are the 2 guys to watch, in my opinion, because they'll foul off pitches. They'll raise the pitch count. They'll give the guys behind them looks at what some of the breaking balls look like before they come to the plate. I'll say it this way. I really like Troy's chances to score if they have a good series from Myers and from Cavanaugh. I really question Troy's ability to compete effectively in this game if those guys don't have good series. Just remember, Cole Myers, leadoff hitter, Ethan Cavanaugh, number 2. If those guys can irritate, the Cajun starters, can give, some base runners for Butcher and for Bryan and for Cobb and some of those guys, that's the ultimate solution. That's a secret sauce for Troy on offense this weekend and any weekend.
Well, I'm not sure if that bodes well for the Cajuns, because it sounds like you're talking about Sam Antonacci and Blake Barthol for Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
Those 2 guys were on base and really hard to get out. All right, so now let's go the other way. Who should the Cajuns be looking for on the mound? And are they going to be as foolish as Southern Miss to pitch to Kyle DeBarge, who, Golden Eagles fans will have nightmares over him for the next year?
Oh, I can imagine. Well, there's an X factor there as well. A couple of years ago, Garrett Gaines was terrific. He was freshman of the year, right-handed pitcher. Last year, he had the surgery, missed the whole year. And Skylar Meade, the Troy coach, was really careful, as he always is, in nudging him back. He was on a pitch count early. He'd pitch 10 pitches early in the non-conference, then 20, then 25, then 40, then 45. Well, he started the last few. In the Georgia State series in Troy a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, he really started looking like Garrett Gaines looked his freshman and his sophomore season. Really in control, really attacking. Unfortunately, there was a weather delay, and we had to delay for 5.5 hours, and so he couldn't go the rest of the way. Last week, he was really competitive against Coastal Carolina, didn't figure in the decision. If he continues to make that upward ascent with his stamina, with his command, with the good, extension on his fastball, coupled with Luke Lyon, the number 2 starter, and Stewart on Sunday, I think Gaines can really be a tone setter for the Friday game if he has continued that progression.
Right. And this doesn't matter how old you are. It's not about coming back physically. It's about mentally being able to let it go and think your arm is not going to become detached. I'm sure you're guarding against that through the first 3 or 4 outings, that you're worried. And then you're like, all right, if it comes attached, it comes attached, but I got to let it go. And eventually you get over that mental hurdle.
I think that's a great point. And he's a mentally strong kid, but
Sure.
You're talking about just letting it rip,
Right.
You don't necessarily do it in your bullpens. You don't necessarily do it in your midweek work. When you're facing DeBarge with runners at second and third,
right.
You better have confidence that you can let it rip. I think you make a great point.
Right. Yeah. Or in this case, again, I'm not pitching to Kyle DeBarge with first base open. Barry, I may not pitch to Kyle DeBarge with third base open. I'm walking Kyle DeBarge in this lineup. for the Cajuns.
If you're
Do
Dave
not
Schultz and you
Kyle
see him in the on-deck circle, you're pointing. Okay,
Yeah.
first base, first
Yep.
base.
We're
You know,
moving
don't
along.
even come to the plate. Just go straight
Don't-
on-deck circle,
even
first
think.
base. Yeah.
And if I'm the Troy coach, I may even tell that DeBarge the first, but
Yeah,
when they're
just
warming
go
up.
over there
By the
pregame
way-
and say, look, when just every time he's up, send him over there, okay?
Leave your batting
thinks we're-
gloves on the bus because you're not going to need them. You will have no at-bats during this series.
He's a great player, goodness.
He's Barry McKnight. Really appreciate him coming on. He is the voice, as far as I'm concerned, of the Sun Belt. He's the voice of the Troy Trojans. Should be a tremendous series. Enjoy it. We'll probably get a little bit of you and a little bit of ESPN3 and a little bit of J-Dub, Jay Walker as we get to enjoy two of the best calling what should be a premier series this weekend in college baseball. Barry, thanks for hopping on Locked On Sun Belt. Enjoy the baseball.
Thank you very much, Dave. Always good to talk with you.